Okay, it's 12 o'clock, so let's kick it off. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Nicole Jeter West. Hi, Pedro Pope. I am, first and foremost, I'm a mom, a wife, and I like to putz around and spend time doing some marketing stuff in the sports world. And that's what I've been doing for the last 20 some odd years.
Oh, my goodness. I love it. So why don't you tell us, how did you start off in the sports and entertainment world?
So I started off right out of college. I was actually doing my interviews straight out of school, University of Delaware, fighting blue hens. And I went into New York because I wanted to work for an advertising agency. And I went and got some really great interviews with some of the big ad age firms at that time, and was excited to just get like a newbie entry level position so that I could get my foot in the door. And as I was there doing all of my interviews, I went to see a high school childhood friend of mine, Matt Pizarro's, who is now a big time executive over at the Bucks. And I went to see him for lunch and ended up spending some time in the lobby of MSG on the 14th floor, for all who remember. And as I was sitting there, a gentleman came by and asked if I was waiting for an interview, because I was in my one interview outfit that I had with my like pencil skirt, and waiting for Matt to come out for lunch, and ended up asking me if I had another interview in me, is the long and short of it. I did. I said, sure. Had no idea who I was meeting with and what was about to happen. And I ended up interviewing with the gentleman by the name of Mark Panis, who at the time was the VP of marketing for the New York Knicks. And ended up getting offered a trainee position. And at the time, a trainee at MSG was a glorified intern. You got a opportunity to work there for a year with no guarantee of there being a job for you after. They actually told you, like, you won't get a job hereafter because there weren't any full-time opportunities. And you didn't get any benefits. And so I got an offer from an ad agency that was like full-time position, benefits and everything. And then I got the offer from the Knicks, which was, hourly pay, no benefits, and you won't have a job in a year. And I decided to go work for the Knicks.
That's awesome. So Showtime 194 says, so proud of you, little sis. So.
Oh, hi. That's a college friend. What's up, girl?
That's great. So you spent a year at the training program. So how did you get how did the full-time position come about?
So I decided that once I got like my feet wet and realized what it was to be working in the sports world, and I got to work with such amazing people at that time, the likes of Peter Fagan and Petra Pope and Matt Pizarro's, and there's just so many. And I loved it, and I was enthralled with it, Zendra Collis. And so I decided I wanted to stay and that I needed to make myself invaluable. And usually they'll say that, no one's invaluable. So I ended up developing and working on a program, which was our first groove truck. And so I scheduled the groove truck and did grassroots marketing and ended up developing that. And basically 6 months in said, hey, we have this really great program now. Nobody else wants to run this or do this. And so what's going to happen once I leave? And started to try and create a role for myself. And I had a great manager at the time, Steve Cappellini, and he helped to make a position for me. And I ended up being a marketing coordinator.
That's
Shout
awesome.
out to Groove Truck.
Oh, well, there's Petra and Jason. Definitely remember the group truck. So that's awesome.
Hey, Mikado.
And Nicole, how long were you at the Garden?
So I did what I love to say, 2 tours of duty at MSG. So my first tour of duty was for 5 years or 4.5 years. And then I went and did some other projects and worked at some other organizations. And I came back and I did another 4 or 5. So total all in 9 years.
9 years. Oh boy. And I know Connie, who's watching, we had someone else from MSG on, and she said that you always do multiple stops at MSG. So, so from MSG, after your second stop, where did you go next?
So from MSG, I went and I worked at a small ad agency called The Mix. And it's where I worked. It was a female owned, Robin Streisand. And I got to just really spend time like understanding what it was like to be an entrepreneur and to get outside of sport. And so I worked on things like NYU and Prudential Insurance and, just non-sport entities, Nickelodeon. And I realized, one, I loved the entrepreneurial side of it. And then I also realized that I really love sport. And so I decided I wanted to take my own shot at doing my own entrepreneurial endeavor. And so I created NJW Marketing and worked with a lot of athletes and their foundations and developed programs alongside wonderful women of Isla Donchin and Erica Stanley. And we developed programs for NBA All-Star and Troy Vincent and other entertainers. And we just ended up really developing programs for their foundations and helping them raise funds and doing it in a way that was different for them because a lot of those athletes used their family to help run their foundations at that time. And so how could we kind of bring some professionalism to that and develop programs for them? And so that was fun. And I did that for 2 years. And then Steve Mills gave me a call and said, hey, it's a new world. It's a different day. There's different people and would love for you to come back. And so I love Steve, and so I did, and I got to work with a wonderful gentleman of Hunter Lockman, who's now at the Washington Monumental Sports, and so and was able to go back at a very different time. When we were there for the first run, it was there are no tickets to sell. We're just having fun. We're doing some fun marketing stuff. We're engaging fans, and we had a long wait list. When I went back, we uncovered that there was not a long wait list, and we had lots of tickets to sell for the very first time. And we had a team that not everybody was familiar with and didn't have as many big names. And so we had to develop the first sales team ever at MSG because there had never been an inbound sales team, an in-house sales team to go outbound. And then we had to sort of really hone our skills on benefits and other offers to try and retain subscribers. And so it was a very different experience.
Wow. And that's really one of the things that I want to touch upon is your marketing experience and how you've been able to hone in and be so close to the revenue side. Because when you went over to the USTA, which we want to hear about, that was one of the things, I mean, you were focused on driving revenue for that event. So how did you bridge the two, Nicole?
I started in marketing at the USTA. I did my first 2 years there, focused on marketing and focusing on marketing the US Open and all of their pro sports tennis events leading up to the Open. And then Lou Scheer, Chief Revenue Officer at the time and still is, reached out and said, hey, we are looking to develop a digital sponsorship team to drive revenue and develop a whole new revenue stream. And he's like, I'm looking for someone to lead that group, to develop it. There was no sort of infrastructure there in place. And he asked me if I was interested. And I said no. I said no multiple times. And it was really twofold. One, I never saw myself as a salesperson. I was always kind of like, that's not me. That's not who I am. That's not my personality. And I also was like, I don't know enough about digital. I know digital from sort of a marketing perspective of how I use it, but you're looking for somebody to help lead all your platforms, develop your sponsorship programs, and to also integrate and really lead the relationship with IBM. I was like, that's not me, right? Like there's so many other people that could be. And I will remember fondly him saying to me, like, I'm not looking for somebody who has all of those pieces. I'm looking for somebody who knows how to lead. And I will forever be grateful for that. And I will forever be grateful for my husband telling me, just because you're scared and uncomfortable doesn't mean you can't do it. And I will say, like, that is been probably one of the largest moments or pivot moments for me in my career was taking that on, developing a team of some brilliant people, Brian Ryerson, Tara Osterhard, just really creating a group that we could go out and develop an opportunity for partners who were already spending a significant amount of money with the US Open in their partnership deals, and find a new way to develop new revenue streams, and to come into that relationship knowing that there's a partnership team already there that was successful and led, and not sort of stepping on anyone's toes. There was a lot of maneuvering there. And then ultimately, while we did that and we set that up and created a successful digital program, I ended up taking ticketing under my team as well. And so got to work with the likes of Monica Harrigan and John Poppy and those groups and develop and sort of imagine what ticketing was like for the US Open.
Wow. That's amazing. Congratulations. And
it's fun. Lots of fun.
Yeah. And how long were you at the USTA?
5 years.
5 years. And
I've got this 5-year thing going.
And after the USTA, where did you go next?
So from the USTA, I was loving life. I had developed my digital team. They were amazing. Ticketing was running and we were doing amazing things. We were getting ready to rebuild and do all of the new work that's now in place at Billie Jean King Tennis Center. And so I was tapped by a gentleman named Mike Andreyko, who also I knew from my days at MSG in my second tour when we were developing bunker suites together. And he said, I work for Legends, which is a sports agency owned by the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Yankees, and said, we're looking for a CMO. And I said, great. I said, do you want some names? And he said, silly, I'm calling you. Like, I want you to be a CMO. And it was funny because I have always said, and anybody who kind of knows me, I've always said I didn't want to be in the C-suite. It was a thing. Like, I just thought people in the C-suite didn't do like the fun work. And I always wanted to get to do the fun work. And so, but I had a meeting with the folks over at Legends, Shervin Marhashmi, Mike Toman, the CEO and COO, and ended up being really excited about what they were building. It was very entrepreneurial in nature. They were, sort of still starting out, although they had been in business for a while. They were still kind of figuring out what the next level was going to be for them. And there was a lot of opportunity to build. And I still got to play on the revenue side because I was very much, I'd say, a different CMO. I was a new business development CMO.
Got it.
So very much focused on, how we bring in new clients, being part of pitches, being part of going out and trying to find new opportunities with our current clientele, and onboarding them. And ultimately, it was being part of that experience that got me to participate and connect with LA 28.
Wow, amazing. So before we talk about LA 2028, from the revenue perspective, right? One of the things that I've been having conversations about is that post-COVID, marketing is going to look totally different. That the marketing person is going to be responsible for revenue, or digital or the digital space. So what are your thoughts in regards to how traditional marketers have to think about marketing post this global pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I liken it to when there was sort of the convergence of people going, oh, like there's no longer communications and marketing, right? Like the two are not separate anymore. And then the same conversation happened around technology. And it was like, right now, you don't have just a CTO, but you have a CTO and a CMO who kind of converge. And so it feels very much like a similar time that we're in. Mm-hmm. And really, to me, it goes back to the need for there to be integration across all, right? So it's less about CMOs are no longer going to be just focused on marketing. Like, I don't know a CMO today that's just focused on marketing. It's just that's not the case. And I've always been in a position where, especially in sport, CMO if you're CMO, like you have to be tied to the revenue in some form. Maybe I didn't look at it that way when I was at the Knicks, but I was tied to season ticket sales, and I was tied to making sure that, you know, we were retaining, and that we were doing marketing for those purposes, and to sell tickets. And so there's always the need to get tied to what the end result is for that particular product or service. And as a marketer, your whole purpose of being, right, is to engage and develop a relationship with your fan or your consumer to make them want to consume whatever it is that you are offering, be it content, be it a product, be it a service, for them to want to consume that more. And so I don't see it as necessarily there being a major shift. I see it more as like it's honing in on that. Whereas maybe before you had a little bit more latitude to be sort of freer about maybe your spend or about where you were focusing your goals and objectives for a particular season or year. We have to be a lot more mindful of our marketing efforts and that they are tied to ROI, and whatever that ROI is for your particular business, that is the core. And so to me, it's just more about a more lasered focus on that, less about there being a huge shift.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you for that, Nicole. So tell us about your current role, LA 2028.
Yay. So super excited to participate and be part of the LA 2028 team. We are charged with developing and preparing for the Olympics and Paralympics that will come in 2028 to LA. It is probably one of the more challenging positions in that we have this 8-year span now to prepare for what will be the largest global sport event that will be held in our country. And so there's a lot that will go into that. There's a lot of planning. What's unique and special about how we are doing it for LA 28 is that we're not going out and building a bunch of new venues. Our legacy very much is to focus on how we can work with the venues that we already have, that we can be the most sustainable games that have taken place. Because as you know, normally with the Olympics and Paralympics, there's a lot of building and venues that go up, and sometimes those venues are no longer utilized afterwards. Right. And that becomes a challenge for that particular city. And so for us, we are using the majority of the venues that are already existing or that are currently being built. And so that is a huge shift and change, because a lot of our efforts are not to focus on building those venues, because a lot of the times the OCOGs are out there and they're focused on that for the first 4 or 5 years. And then they focus on, okay, now we've got to create a great experience for fans. And now we have to figure out how we're going to get everybody around and what the transportation will be and all of those other pieces. We are actually starting with that now. So I get to focus and I'm spending a lot of effort and time around what will be that fan experience. How are we going to engage with that fan on the journey between now and then? How are we doing that with technology in mind? And know that I don't know what the world will look like in 2028. And so how are we developing games with that in mind today? And how do we make sure that we're agile and flexible enough in the building of our infrastructure so that we can be able to tap into whatever the new platform will be at that time?
That's awesome. And Petra says, so proud of you, Nicole. So wanted to make sure that you saw that. So Nicole, you've had an amazing career, very, well respected within the industry. So share with us and our audience today, what would be 3 career insights that you would share that, would be relevant to whether you're at the C-suite, middle management, or just starting out?
Well, first and foremost, I have to tell you, Lisa, we got a shout out on our glasses.
And oh, thank you.
So I would give a couple. First, I would say I use this a lot. So people who've worked with me and been on teams with me know that I say this. I believe that transparency leads to trust. And when I think about sort of my leadership style, it is very much about me being transparent with my teams and with my fellow coworkers. And that means like sometimes transparency is like all the good, the bad, and the ugly. But being transparent in that effort helps to provide a sense of trust. And that sense of trust has led to creating great groups and teams that I've gotten to work with that will like run through a brick wall for you and with you. And so I use that as probably one of my major points that I would share is just transparency in leadership leads to trust, and trust leads to kick-ass teams. That's been my experience. And then one of the big questions that I get asked often, and I'm sure, Elisa, you get this question too, is, you know, how do you balance life and work and family and all of it, right? Regardless of sort of if you have kids or don't, just what is work-life balance? And I spent probably the better half of my career trying to figure that out and really sort of agonizing on how to figure that out, because when I'm at work, I'm 110. Like, that's just how I work. And then when I'm home, I need to be the same. And so what I found, and it happened a little later in life, was that I actually don't believe in balance, because balance requires there to be something that is always sort of like, right, you're always here, right? And you have that pendulum take place. And as soon as something else comes on or comes off, you're out of balance. And that doesn't feel good if you're trying to achieve that balance. And so I always try to center around harmony. And so for me, it's not about balance, it's about harmony. And it's about what is harmonious for me and in my life is not necessarily what's harmonious for you in your life. And that's okay, because that works for me. And so you got to find sort of what works for you and how you achieve that harmony in your life, and know that it's never going to be balanced. But if it's harmonious, then that means sometimes certain parts are a little heavier than others. But as long as it all feels good in the end, then that's okay.
That's awesome. That's great. I love it. I love it.
And then my last would be, being uncomfortable is a sign of growth. And so any time in my career where I have been uncomfortable, it has forced me, it has propelled me to new levels. It has made me grow. And anytime where I feel like I'm too comfortable, then I'm stagnant. And I know there's something that needs to get shaken up. And so I need to either learn something new or push myself to get back to that uncomfortable zone.
Yeah, that's great. Well, awesome, Nicole. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your story and for sharing your career insights. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And we'll see everyone here next Tuesday at 12 o'clock for our next lunchtime conversation. Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.